Welcome to Sigil Sanctum, where we explore the darkest corners of forbidden knowledge and occult mysteries that have haunted humanity for centuries. I'm your host, and today we're embarking on a journey into 3 books, so dangerous that their very existence has been questioned, hunted, and feared across the ages. These aren't your ordinary grimoires or simple collections of spells. They're tomes that have allegedly driven brilliant minds to complete madness, opened doorways to otherworldly realms beyond human comprehension, and claimed the lives of countless souls foolish enough to attempt their forbidden rituals. But before we begin this terrifying descent into darkness, I'm genuinely curious, where in the world are you watching from right now? Are you safely tucked away in your bedroom in New York? Perhaps you're watching from a dimly lit room in London. Or maybe you're somewhere more atmospheric. Drop your location in the comments below. I love knowing that our community of truth seekers spans the globe, united by our fascination with the mysteries that conventional wisdom fears to explore. Tonight, we'll be examining 3 of the most notorious and feared grimoires ever committed to parchment, the Necronomicon, known throughout occult circles as the dreaded Book of Dead Names. The Book of Abramelin, a systematic approach to angelic and demonic magic that has destroyed more practitioners than it has enlightened, and the Grimoire of Honorius, allegedly penned by a pope himself to combat the very forces of hell. Each of these texts has left a trail of destruction, madness, and unexplained phenomena in its wake that stretches across continents and centuries. From the burning libraries of ancient Alexandria to the secret bunkers of Nazi Germany, from medieval monasteries to modern university libraries, these books have consistently brought ruin to those who dared to unlock their secrets. What makes these grimoires particularly terrifying isn't just their alleged supernatural power, it's the documented pattern of tragedy that follows them wherever they surface. We're not talking about simple coincidences or medieval superstitions. We're examining a consistent, verifiable pattern of psychological breakdown, mysterious deaths, and unexplained phenomena that continues to this day. Even in our age of scientific rationalism, the question that haunts every serious researcher of the occult is this: are these books genuinely gateways to supernatural forces beyond human understanding? Or are they sophisticated psychological weapons designed to exploit the deepest fears and ambitions of the human psyche? By the end of tonight's exploration, you'll have enough information to draw your own conclusions, though I warn you, the answer may be more disturbing than either possibility alone. Before we dive deeper into this labyrinth of forbidden knowledge, if you're finding this exploration as fascinating as it is terrifying, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what else we have planned for Sigil Sanctum. We're building a community of fearless truth seekers, and your support helps us delve even deeper into the mysteries that others refuse to explore. The Necronomicon stands as perhaps the most infamous and widely feared grimoire in all of occult literature. Its very name sends chills down the spines of even the most seasoned practitioners of esoteric arts. Legend claims it was penned in the 8th century by the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazard, whose full name was Abdul al-Hazard ibn Ghazi al-Damashqi. This mysterious figure wasn't just any wandering mystic. He was reportedly a brilliant scholar of ancient Mesopotamian religions who had served as an advisor to Umayyad caliphs before his descent into madness. Al-Hazard spent the final 15 years of his life wandering the empty quarter of Arabia, that vast and trackless desert known as Rubai al-Khali. It was here, according to the legends, that he experienced visions so profound and terrifying that they shattered his sanity and opened his mind to cosmic truths that human consciousness was never meant to comprehend. These weren't ordinary religious visions or mystical experiences. They were encounters with entities that existed before the formation of our reality, beings whose very existence challenged every assumption about the nature of life, death, and the cosmos itself. After emerging from the desert, forever changed by what he had witnessed, Al-Hazard spent another 7 years in Damascus, feverishly compiling the Necronomicon. He drew upon decades of studying forbidden texts from Babylon, Egypt, and Arabia, synthesizing this ancient knowledge with the apocalyptic revelations he had received in the wasteland. The book wasn't just a collection of spells, it was a complete cosmology, a detailed account of the true nature of reality that most minds simply cannot process without breaking. The original Arabic title, Kitab al-Azif, translates roughly to the Book of the Howling of Desert Demons. The name Necronomicon, meaning Book of Dead Names, was supposedly given to the Greek translation completed in 950 CE by the Byzantine scholar Theodorus Philotas. This translation was what allowed the book to spread beyond the Arabic-speaking world, though each translation allegedly became more dangerous than the last, as if the act of rendering these concepts into different languages somehow amplified their malevolent power. What makes the Necronomicon particularly insidious is its structure. Unlike other grimoires that focus on specific rituals or magical practices, the Necronomicon presents itself as a historical and theological document. It claims to reveal the true history of Earth, describing how our planet was once ruled by cosmic entities called the Old Ones, beings of such immense power and alien intelligence that they might as well be gods. According to the text, these entities still exist, locked away in dimensions adjacent to our own, waiting for the proper conditions and the proper rituals to return. The book describes in meticulous detail the cities where these entities once dwelt. Iralai, sunken beneath the Pacific Ocean. Iram, the city of pillars hidden in the Arabian desert, and the nightmare plateau of Leng, which exists in the spaces between realities. But more than just describing these places, the Necronomicon provides the means to contact them, to communicate with the entities that inhabit them, and most dangerously of all, to summon these beings into our reality. The most feared section of the Necronomicon is undoubtedly the chapter known as the Opening of the Gate, which provides detailed instructions for creating dimensional portals. This isn't mere fantasy or metaphor. Practitioners who have attempted this ritual have reported phenomena that defy rational explanation. The ritual requires precise astronomical alignments, specific geometric configurations, and most importantly, the practitioner must be in a state of complete mental preparation that borders on dissociation from ordinary reality. Historical accounts of attempts to perform this ritual read like horror stories, but they're documented in sources ranging from Byzantine chronicles to modern police reports. In 1232, a monastery in southern France was found completely abandoned, after monks discovered a copy of the Necronomicon in their library. According to surviving letters from neighboring monasteries, the monks had attempted to destroy what they considered a demonic text, but when that failed, they tried to understand it. The last communication from the monastery spoke of sounds from beneath the earth and shapes that moved in ways that hurt to perceive. When authorities finally investigated, they found the monastery buildings intact but completely empty. No bodies were ever discovered, but investigators reported strange geometric patterns carved into the stone floors of the chapel, and an overwhelming sense of dread that made extended stays impossible. The monastery was sealed by church authorities and remains abandoned to this day. The pattern repeated throughout the medieval period. In 1327, the renowned scholar and translator Thomas of Oxford was commissioned by English nobles to create a Latin translation of certain portions of the Thomas was found dead in his study after completing only 3 chapters. His body showed no signs of violence or disease, but witnesses reported that his hair had turned completely white, and his face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror. His translation notes, written in increasingly erratic handwriting, spoke of truths too vast for mortal minds and the terrible mathematics of reality. During the Renaissance, as interest in ancient knowledge exploded across Europe, several attempts were made to create complete translations of the The most famous was undertaken by Johannes Mercator, nephew of the renowned cartographer. Mercator spent 3 years working on the translation in a villa outside Florence, but his project ended abruptly when locals reported seeing impossible lights emanating from his study and hearing sounds that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. When Mercator's servants finally gathered the courage to investigate, they found his study in a state that defied description. The furniture was arranged in complex geometric patterns. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift when viewed directly, and Mercator himself was found catatonic, his mind completely shattered. He spent the remaining 20 years of his life in a monastery, never speaking coherently again, though he would sometimes scream out mathematical equations that wouldn't be discovered by legitimate scholars for another 2 centuries. The Inquisition, recognizing the consistent pattern of destruction associated with the Necronomicon, launched a systematic campaign to locate and destroy every copy. Their agents, known as hunters of blasphemy, were specifically trained to identify and safely dispose of occult texts. However, even these experienced ecclesiastical investigators often fell victim to the book's influence. Records from the Inquisition archives, made public only in recent decades, describe instances where entire teams of investigators would disappear while pursuing rumors of the Necronomicon's presence. One particularly chilling account from 1487 describes an Inquisition team led by Father Antonio de Segovia, investigating reports of a Necronomicon copy in a castle outside Toledo. The team's final report, found weeks later in an abandoned campsite, described discovering not just the book but evidence that someone had been using it to perform the opening of the gate ritual. The report ends mid-sentence with the words, "The stars are right," and the mathematics prove that space itself as the team was never seen again. While the Necronomicon represents chaos and cosmic horror, the Book of Abramelin presents itself as a systematic, almost scientific approach to supernatural power. This distinction makes it perhaps even more dangerous, as it attracts practitioners who believe they can approach its contents with rational, scholarly minds. History has proven this assumption catastrophically wrong time and again. The book's origins lie in the travels of Abraham von Worms, a wealthy German Kabbalist who lived in the late 14th and early 15th centuries. Unlike many medieval scholars who were content to study ancient texts from the safety of their libraries, Abraham was driven by an insatiable desire for direct, personal experience of the divine mysteries. He liquidated his considerable fortune to fund expeditions across the known world, seeking out masters of hidden knowledge wherever they might be found. Abraham's journey took him first to Constantinople, where he studied with Byzantine mystics, who claimed to preserve pre-Christian magical traditions. From there, he traveled through the dangerous mountain passes of the Caucasus to reach the courts of Georgian princes who were said to employ sorcerers, capable of commanding both angels and demons. His path then led him down the ancient trade routes to Damascus, Cairo, and finally into the deserts of Egypt, where he would encounter the mysterious figure who would change his life forever. The mage known only as Abramelin was reportedly living as a hermit in the desert outside Cairo, in a location that Abraham describes only as the place where the sand dunes form the shape of the sacred star. Modern scholars have spent considerable effort trying to identify this location, but the geographical clues in Abraham's account seem to describe a place that shouldn't exist. According to conventional geology, an oasis that appears and disappears. According to celestial cycles, Abramelin, according to Abraham's account, was neither young nor old, but seemed to exist outside the normal flow of time. He claimed to have learned his magical system from sources that predated both Christianity and Islam, drawing upon Egyptian priest magic, Babylonian star worship, and Hebrew mysticism to create something entirely new. What made his system unique wasn't just its power, but its apparent safety, provided the practitioner followed the instructions with absolute precision. The magical operation described in the Book of Abramelin is unlike anything found in other grimoires. Rather than simple spells or invocations, it presents a complete spiritual transformation that takes 6 months to a year to complete. The practitioner must withdraw from all worldly concerns, live in complete chastity, maintain constant prayer and meditation, and follow dietary restrictions that gradually purify both body and spirit. The goal of this lengthy preparation isn't to gain magical power directly, but to establish contact with one's holy guardian angel, divine being assigned to each human soul that serves as a bridge between mortal consciousness and cosmic reality. Once this contact is established, the practitioner gains access to what the book calls the true will, perfect knowledge of their purpose in the cosmic order, and the power to fulfill that purpose. But the Abramelin operation doesn't stop with angelic contact. The second half of the system involves using the protection and authority granted by the holy guardian angel to command demons. This isn't the crude coercion found in other grimoires, but a sophisticated form of spiritual authority. Based on the practitioner's alignment with divine will, the demons, according to the system, are compelled to obey not through threats or bargains, but because the practitioner has become a legitimate representative of divine authority. The book contains hundreds of magical squares, geometric arrangements of letters that supposedly encode specific commands to various classes of spirits. These squares aren't random collections of symbols, but represent a complex mathematical language that expresses divine will, informs that both angels and demons can understand. Modern analysis of these squares has revealed mathematical properties that weren't formally recognized by European scholars until centuries after the book was written. What makes the Book of Abramelin particularly seductive to modern practitioners is its apparent rationality and systematic approach. Unlike the chaotic cosmology of the Necronomicon or the paradoxical theology of the Grimoire of Honorius, Abramelin's system presents itself as a logical spiritual science. This appearance of safety has lured countless practitioners into attempting the operation, often with results that demonstrate just how deceptive this apparent rationality truly is. The most famous modern practitioner was Aleister Crowley, who attempted the Abramelin operation at Boleskine House, his estate on the shores of Loch Ness in Scotland. Crowley began the operation in 1899, at the age of 24. Convinced that his intellectual brilliance and thorough preparation would ensure success, he had spent years studying the text, learning Hebrew, and preparing the ritual space according to the book's precise specifications. Crowley's attempt began promisingly. He maintained the required isolation and purifications, performed the daily prayers and invocations, and reported increasingly vivid visionary experiences. His diaries from this period describe encounters with angelic beings of indescribable beauty and wisdom, communications that seemed to expand his consciousness beyond ordinary human limitations. However, Crowley's impatience and arrogance ultimately proved his undoing. Rather than completing the full 6-month preparation, he attempted to accelerate the process by intensifying the rituals. This deviation from the prescribed method had immediate and catastrophic consequences. Servants at Boleskine House reported that the building itself seemed to become alive with malevolent intelligence. Furniture would rearrange itself overnight. Strange sounds echoed through empty rooms, and several staff members experienced what can only be described as demonic attacks. The situation deteriorated rapidly when Crowley, believing he had achieved contact with his holy guardian angel, prematurely began the demon summoning phase of the operation. Without proper angelic protection, he found himself dealing with entities that had no obligation to obey him and every reason to cause chaos. The phenomena at Boleskine House became so violent that most of the staff fled, leaving Crowley essentially alone with forces he could neither control nor banish. Crowley was eventually forced to abandon the operation entirely. fleeing to Paris where he spent months recovering from what he described as spiritual injuries that left him physically and mentally exhausted. However, the damage had been done. Boleskine House remained plagued by paranormal activity for decades afterward. Subsequent owners reported apparitions, poltergeist phenomena, and an oppressive atmosphere that made normal habitation impossible. The house's troubled history continued well into the modern era. In 1965, it was purchased by Jimmy Page, guitarist for Led Zeppelin, who was fascinated by Crowley's occult activities. Page reported that the house seemed to retain some essence of the uncompleted magical operation, with guests experiencing disturbing dreams, unexplained illnesses, and encounters with apparitions that seemed to be neither fully human nor entirely supernatural. The cursed nature of Boleskine House was further demonstrated in 2015 when a fire of unknown origin destroyed much of the building. Local fire investigators found no evidence of electrical faults, arson, or any conventional cause for the blaze. Some occult researchers have suggested that the fire was a supernatural cleansing, a final resolution of forces that had been left unbound since Crowley's failed operation over a century earlier. During World War II, the Book of Abramelin attracted the attention of Nazi occultists, who were desperate to find supernatural weapons that might turn the tide of war. Heinrich Himmler's NR, the SS organization devoted to researching ancestral heritage and occult practices, obtained several copies of the book and assigned teams of scholars to study its methods. The Nazi experiments with Abramelin magic were conducted at Wolfsburg Castle, Himmler's headquarters for mystical research. Teams of SS officers, selected for their supposed psychic sensitivity and Aryan purity, attempted to perform modified versions of the Abramelin operation. The experiments were supervised by SS Oberfuhrer Karl Maria Williget, known as Himmler's Rasputin, who believed that Germanic peoples had natural superiority in magical practices. The results were catastrophic. Rather than gaining control over supernatural forces, the Nazi practitioners found themselves overwhelmed by entities that seemed to feed on hatred and violence. Several participants suffered complete mental breakdowns, while others became obsessed with increasingly bizarre and destructive rituals. One classified report, discovered in Soviet archives after the war, describes an incident where an entire team of practitioners disappeared overnight, leaving behind only their uniforms arranged in geometric patterns and walls covered with symbols that caused physical pain to anyone who looked at them directly. The failure of these experiments may have contributed to the Nazi leadership's increasing irrationality in the final years of the war. Several historians have noted that Himmler and other high-ranking Nazis became increasingly obsessed with mystical solutions to military problems, devoting resources to occult research that could have been used for conventional weapons development. In the post-war period, intelligence agencies from both East and West took a keen interest in the Nazi occult experiments. Declassified CIA documents from the 1950s show that American intelligence officers attempted to recruit surviving Nazi occultists and continue research into supernatural warfare. These programs, conducted under the broader umbrella of projects like MK-Ultra, included attempts to weaponize the psychological effects of grimoires, like the Book of Abramelin. One particularly disturbing case from this period involves Dr. Friedrich Weber, a former SS officer who had participated in the Wolfsburg experiments. Weber was recruited by American intelligence and given a new identity in exchange for sharing his knowledge of Nazi occult research. Working from a classified facility in Nevada, Weber attempted to create a safe version of the Abramelin operation that could be used to enhance the psychic abilities of intelligence operatives. Weber's experiments continued for 3 years, before they were abruptly terminated following what CIA documents describe only as an incident resulting in permanent facility contamination. The facility was sealed, and Weber himself disappeared under circumstances that remain classified to this day. Local residents near the Nevada site reported strange lights and sounds for years afterward, phenomena that only ceased when the entire area was designated as a nuclear testing zone and evacuated. The grimoire of Honorius represents perhaps the most theologically troubling of all grimoires, as it allegedly provides methods for Christians to summon and command demons while maintaining their salvation. This paradoxical approach to supernatural power has made it both highly sought after and extremely dangerous, as practitioners often underestimate the spiritual and psychological risks involved in trying to serve both God and devil simultaneously. The book's attributed authorship to Pope Honorius III adds another layer of complexity to its legacy. Whether or not the historical pope actually wrote the grimoire, the association with papal authority has given the book a unique status among Christian occultists who see it as somehow legitimizing their magical practices. This perceived legitimacy has led to some of the most spectacular failures in the history of ceremonial magic. The grimoire's central premise is that demons, as fallen angels, remain subject to divine authority and can therefore be commanded by properly ordained Christian practitioners. The book provides detailed hierarchies of demonic entities, each with specific powers and areas of influence. More importantly, it claims to provide the precise prayers, conjurations, and protective rituals necessary to safely summon these entities and compel their obedience. The most notorious section of the grimoire of Honorius is the ritual known as the Key of Hell, which allegedly allows the practitioner to open a direct conduit to the underworld and summon any demon, regardless of rank or power. This ritual requires extensive preparation, including months of fasting, prayer, and purification, as well as the construction of a complex ritual space, incorporating both Christian and pre-Christian symbolism. Historical attempts to perform the Key of Hell ritual have resulted in some of the most well-documented cases of supernatural phenomena in occult literature. In 1521, Cardinal Alessandro Farnese, later Pope Paul III, was rumored to have attempted the ritual in the catacombs beneath Rome. According to secret Vatican archives that weren't made public until the 20th century, Farnese's attempt resulted in phenomena so disturbing that Pope Leo X ordered the catacombs permanently sealed. The official Vatican account describes Farnese being found unconscious in the ritual chamber, surrounded by evidence of intense heat that had melted metal objects, but left parchment scrolls untouched. When Farnese regained consciousness, he claimed to have witnessed the true structure of hell and the cosmic rebellion that led to Satan's fall. However, he also reported that something had gone wrong with the ritual's protective elements, allowing demonic entities to gain a foothold in the physical world. For months afterward, the Vatican was plagued by unexplained phenomena. Sacred objects would spontaneously combust, Latin prayers would be heard spoken backward in empty chapels, and several priests reported encounters with figures that appeared to be biblical saints but spoke blasphemy. The phenomena only ceased when Farnese performed an elaborate exorcism ritual that purportedly took 3 days and nights to complete. During the witch trials of the late medieval and early modern periods, the grimoire of Honorius became a particular target of ecclesiastical authorities. Unlike other grimoires that were clearly heretical, the Honorius texts' claim to Christian orthodoxy made it especially dangerous in the eyes of the Church. Possession of the book was considered evidence of both heresy and treason, as it suggested that the accused believed they could command supernatural forces without proper ecclesiastical authority. The book's influence extended beyond individual practitioners to entire communities. In 1634, the entire village of Loudun, in France, became the center of a mass possession event that many historians now believe was triggered by someone attempting to use the grimoire of Honorius. The case began when Urbain Grandier, a local priest accused of sexual impropriety, was also found to possess a copy of the grimoire. The Loudun possessions involved dozens of nuns from the local Ursuline convent, who began exhibiting violent, sexualized behavior that they claimed was caused by demons sent by Grandier. The phenomena escalated to include levitation, speaking in unknown languages, and the spontaneous appearance of strange marks on the nuns' bodies. The case attracted attention from across Europe, with Catholic and Protestant observers both documenting events that seemed to defy rational explanation. Modern analysis of the Loudun case suggests that Grandier may have attempted to use the grimoire of Honorius to influence the nuns' behavior, but lost control of the forces he had summoned. The exorcism rituals performed to resolve the situation took months to complete and involved some of the most experienced demonologists in the Catholic Church. Even after Grandier was executed and the possessions officially ended, the convent remained plagued by unexplained phenomena for years. The grimoire surfaced again during the tumultuous period of the French Revolution, when anti-clerical sentiment led to widespread interest in anything that seemed to challenge church authority. Several revolutionary leaders, including Jacques Hebert and Joseph Fouché, were rumored to have experimented with the book's rituals as a way of symbolically overthrowing not just the earthly church but the entire cosmic order it represented. These experiments allegedly took place in the desecrated Cathedral of Notre Dame, which had been converted into a temple of reason during the Revolution's most radical phase. Participants in these rituals reported encounters with entities that claimed to be the spirits of executed aristocrats seeking vengeance, but observers noted that these entities exhibited knowledge and powers that suggested they were something far more dangerous than mere human ghosts. The revolutionary experiments with the grimoire of Honorius may have contributed to the period's increasing violence and paranoia. Several historical accounts describe revolutionary leaders becoming obsessed with supernatural enemies and developing elaborate theories about occult conspiracies against the Republic. Some historians have suggested that the terror's systematic brutality reflected not just political extremism but the influence of supernatural forces that had been unleashed through misguided magical experiments. The advent of the digital age has transformed how these dangerous grimoires spread and influence new generations of practitioners. What once required years of searching through rare book dealers and private collectors can now be found with a simple internet search. This accessibility has led to an explosion of amateur practitioners who lack the historical knowledge, psychological preparation, and cultural context that might provide some protection against these texts. More dangerous aspects. Online forums dedicated to chaos magic, left-hand path practices, and experimental occultism are filled with accounts of individuals who have downloaded digital copies of these grimoires and attempted their rituals without proper preparation. The results follow the same patterns documented throughout history: mental breakdown, unexplained phenomena, and in some cases, complete disappearance from online communities and, allegedly, from physical reality itself. One particularly disturbing trend involves the use of AI translation tools to convert these grimoires into modern languages. While this might seem like a technological advancement that makes ancient knowledge more accessible, practitioners report that these machine translations seem to amplify the book's dangerous properties. Several cases have been documented where individuals using AI-translated versions of these texts experienced phenomena within hours, rather than the weeks or months typically associated with traditional copies. Dr. Sarah Chen, a researcher at Stanford University studying the psychological effects of religious and occult texts, has documented over 200 cases of individuals who have reported severe psychological disturbances after encountering digital copies of these grimoires. Her research suggests that something about the digitization process, whether it's the removal of physical context, the speed of access, or some unknown factor, makes these texts even more dangerous than their historical counterparts. What we're seeing, Dr. Chen explains in her classified report to the Department of Homeland Security, is a pattern of psychological contagion that spreads through digital networks at unprecedented speed. Individuals who might never have encountered these texts in their physical form are now accessing them casually, often while browsing for entertainment, and experiencing profound psychological trauma as a result. The most documented modern case involves the Necronomicon network, a group of programmers and hackers who created an encrypted file-sharing system specifically for distributing occult texts. The network, which operated from 2018 to 2020, allowed users to download high-resolution scans of rare grimoires, including alleged authentic copies of all three books we've discussed tonight. The network's administrators, operating under the pseudonyms Abdul Abraham and Honorius, claim to be providing a public service by making these historically significant texts available to researchers and practitioners worldwide. However, the network's activity patterns suggest something more sinister. Users reported that the system seemed to actively recommend certain texts based on their psychological profiles, almost as if it were designed to match the most dangerous grimoires with the most vulnerable practitioners. The network was shut down abruptly in March 2020, when all three administrators disappeared simultaneously from their respective locations. In Seattle, Prague, and Cairo, local authorities found their residences abandoned but intact, with high-end computer equipment still running and displaying what investigators described as complex geometric patterns that caused nausea and disorientation. When viewed directly, more disturbing were the reports from network users in the weeks following its shutdown. Over 300 individuals across 40 countries reported experiencing identical nightmares featuring the three administrators, who appeared as figures of immense age and wisdom offering forbidden knowledge in exchange for unnamed services. Many of these individuals had never met each other or communicated outside the network, yet their reports showed remarkable consistency in describing both the dreams and the sense of compulsion to continue practicing the rituals they had downloaded. Intelligence agencies across multiple nations have since classified information about the Necronomicon network, treating it as a matter of national security rather than simple criminal activity. Leaked documents suggest that government researchers believe the network may have been a front for something far more sophisticated than a simple file-sharing system, possibly an attempt to create a global network of practitioners under the influence of the same supernatural forces that have plagued individual practitioners throughout history. The COVID-19 pandemic created perfect conditions for increased interest in these dangerous texts. With millions of people isolated, unemployed, and seeking meaning in an uncertain world, online occult communities experienced unprecedented growth. Forums dedicated to chaos magic, urban exploration of allegedly haunted locations, and ritual practices saw membership increases of over 1,000% between March 2020 and December 2021. This surge in interest coincided with a dramatic increase in reports of supernatural phenomena, mental health crises, and unexplained disappearances. Among individuals known to be interested in occult practices, the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, in a classified report obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, documented over 2,000 cases of missing persons whose last known activities involved researching or attempting to acquire copies of historical grimoires. Dr. Michael Reeves, a psychiatrist specializing in religious trauma at Johns Hopkins University, has treated dozens of individuals who claim to have been psychologically damaged by encounters with these texts. His research suggests that the grimoire function as psychological warfare, using sophisticated understanding of human cognition to create mental states that make practitioners vulnerable to suggestion, hallucination, and complete psychological breakdown. These texts, Dr. Reeves explains, seem to have been designed by minds that understood human psychology far better than we do, even today. They use specific combinations of imagery, language patterns, and conceptual frameworks that bypass rational thought and speak directly to the unconscious mind. The result is that practitioners often find themselves believing and doing things that their conscious minds would reject as impossible or dangerous. The most recent documented case occurred in 2023, when Emma Rodriguez, a graduate student in comparative religion at Yale University, disappeared while researching her dissertation on historical grimoire. Rodriguez had obtained special permission to access Yale's restricted collection of occult texts, including what the library classified as a 16th-century Latin translation of the Necronomicon. Rodriguez's research notes, found in her abandoned apartment, show a clear progression from academic curiosity to complete obsession over the course of 3 months. Her early entries are scholarly and analytical, but they gradually become increasingly personal and paranoid. The final entries, written in a mixture of English, Latin, and symbols that university linguists have been unable to identify, describe encounters with entities that exist in the spaces between seconds and speak the mathematics of reality. The Yale University administration has since sealed their occult collection and requires psychological evaluation for any researcher seeking access to texts classified as potentially dangerous. However, this precaution may be too little. Rodriguez's research notes were found uploaded to multiple file-sharing sites, and her final entries have been copied and distributed throughout online occult communities. As we reach the end of our journey through the world's most feared grimoires, we must confront the fundamental question that haunts every serious researcher of the occult. In an age of scientific rationalism and technological advancement, how do we explain the consistent pattern of destruction that follows these books across centuries and cultures? The skeptical explanation is that these grimoires function as elaborate psychological traps, using sophisticated understanding of human nature to exploit our deepest fears and ambitions. From this perspective, the books are products of brilliant, but malevolent minds who understood how to weaponize belief itself. The rituals don't summon actual supernatural entities, but create psychological states that make practitioners vulnerable to hallucination, suggestion, and mental breakdown. This explanation has merit and is supported by considerable psychological research. Dr. Lisa Hartwell, a researcher at the Institute for Advanced Consciousness Studies, has spent 20 years analyzing the psychological techniques embedded in historical grimoires. Her work demonstrates that these texts use specific patterns of imagery, language, and conceptual structure that can induce altered states of consciousness. Even in readers who approach them with skeptical intent, these books, Dr. Hartwell explains, represent perhaps the most sophisticated forms of psychological manipulation ever created. They use techniques that we're only now beginning to understand through modern neuroscience and cognitive psychology. The authors, whoever they were, had an intuitive understanding of how human consciousness works that rivals our most advanced scientific knowledge. However, the psychological explanation struggles to account for the physical phenomena associated with these grimoires, the unexplained fires, the geometric patterns that appear overnight, the synchronized experiences reported by individuals who have never communicated with each other. These aspects of the grimoire phenomenon suggest that something beyond pure psychology may be involved. The supernatural explanation holds that these books genuinely provide access to non-human intelligences that exist beyond our normal reality. From this perspective, the grimoires function as technological devices, complex systems for communicating with and potentially controlling entities that exist in dimensions parallel to our own. The psychological effects are real but secondary, the result of human minds encountering forms of intelligence that evolved according to completely different principles. This explanation is supported by the remarkable consistency of reports across cultures and centuries. The entities described in modern encounters with these grimoires match descriptions from medieval sources with uncanny accuracy, despite the fact that modern practitioners often have no knowledge of historical accounts. The mathematical and astronomical information contained in the books often proves to be accurate in ways that couldn't have been known to their supposed authors. Dr. James Morrison, a quantum physicist at MIT who has spent his career studying anomalous phenomena, suggests a third possibility that combines elements of both explanations. Morrison's research into consciousness and quantum mechanics has led him to theorize that human belief and intention may have the power to literally reshape reality at the quantum level. What we're dealing with, Morrison explains, may be books that were designed to exploit quantum consciousness effects that we're only now beginning to understand. The grimoires may function as quantum amplifiers, using focused human intention to create genuine alterations in space-time that manifest as apparently supernatural phenomena. The psychological effects prepare the practitioner's consciousness to serve as a quantum field generator, while the rituals provide the specific parameters for the alterations. This theory would explain why the grimoires seem to become more dangerous. As more people believe in them, each new practitioner adds their consciousness to a growing quantum field that makes the described phenomena increasingly probable. It would also explain why digital copies seem to be more dangerous than physical ones. as digital distribution allows the consciousness amplification effect to spread at unprecedented speed. Whatever the true explanation, the practical reality remains unchanged. These books represent genuine dangers that extend far beyond their historical significance. The evidence suggests that, whether through psychological manipulation, supernatural influence, or quantum consciousness effects, these grimoires have the power to fundamentally alter the lives and, sometimes end the lives of those who encountered them. Modern security agencies have taken notice of this pattern. The Department of Homeland Security maintains a classified division known as the Anomalous Phenomena Research Unit, which monitors the distribution and effects of these texts. Their internal reports, obtained through leaked documents, show that they consider certain grimoires to be weapons of mass destruction, capable of causing widespread psychological casualties if distributed widely enough. The unit's most recent assessment, dated September 2023, warns that the combination of digital distribution, social media amplification, and increasing social isolation has created perfect conditions for what they term memetic warfare, the use of ideas and beliefs as weapons against enemy populations. The report specifically identifies the three grimoires we've discussed tonight as Category Alpha, threats that require constant monitoring and containment. International law enforcement agencies have begun coordinating efforts to track the distribution of these texts. Operation Grimoire, a joint initiative between the FBI, Interpol, and several European intelligence agencies, has successfully shut down over 200 websites distributing occult texts since 2020. However, the operation's classified reports acknowledge that their efforts may be counterproductive, as the attention seems to increase rather than decrease public interest in the books. The Vatican has also taken unprecedented steps to address the modern spread of these grimoires. In 2022, Pope Francis authorized the creation of a new ecclesiastical office, the Congregation for the Doctrine of Supernatural Threats, specifically tasked with monitoring and countering the influence of dangerous occult texts. This marks the first time in centuries that the Catholic Church has officially acknowledged the existence of supernatural threats requiring active intervention. Cardinal Alessandro Toretti, who heads the new congregation, issued a statement that was notably different from traditional church positions on occult matters. We are not dealing with mere superstition or psychological delusion. Our research has confirmed that certain texts possess properties that cannot be explained through conventional understanding. The Church has a responsibility to protect the faithful from genuine spiritual dangers, regardless of whether those dangers conform to traditional theological categories. The psychological research community has also begun taking these phenomena more seriously. The American Psychological Association established a special task force on religious and occult trauma in 2021, acknowledging that traditional therapeutic approaches are often inadequate for treating individuals who have been psychologically damaged by encounters with these texts. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, who chairs the task force, has developed new treatment protocols specifically for what she terms bibliogenic trauma, psychological damage caused by exposure to dangerous texts. Her research shows that traditional cognitive behavioral therapy often fails with these patients because their beliefs about reality have been fundamentally altered by their experiences. These individuals aren't suffering from simple delusions, Dr. Martinez explains. They've had experiences that challenge the basic assumptions about reality that underlie most psychological treatment. We've had to develop entirely new therapeutic approaches that acknowledge the possibility that their experience may have been genuine while still helping them function in consensus reality. The academic world has been slower to acknowledge the dangers posed by these grimoires, but even here, changes are beginning to occur. Several major universities have implemented new policies regarding access to rare occult texts, requiring psychological screening and supervision for researchers studying certain materials. The Association of Research Libraries issued guidelines in 2023 recommending that institutions treat historical grimoires as hazardous materials requiring special handling protocols. Professor David Kellerman, who directs the Medieval Studies program at Harvard University, explains the academic community's growing concern. We've documented too many cases of promising young scholars whose careers and lives have been derailed by their research into these texts. At some point, intellectual freedom has to be balanced against genuine safety concerns. We wouldn't allow students unsupervised access to radioactive materials or deadly pathogens. These books may require similar precautions. The technology sector has also been forced to grapple with the unique challenges posed by digital distribution of dangerous grimoires. Major tech companies have developed sophisticated algorithms designed to identify and flag occult content that matches known dangerous patterns. However, these systems often struggle with the nuanced nature of the threat. The same information that causes psychological breakdown in some individuals may be harmless to others, depending on their mental state, beliefs, and intentions. Sarah Kim, a content moderation specialist at a major social media platform, describes the challenge. We're trying to identify content that's dangerous not because of what it says explicitly, but because of what it does to people's minds. Our AI systems can identify hate speech or violent content fairly reliably, but they struggle with texts that appear scholarly or historical but have documented psychological effects. It's like trying to program a computer to identify cursed objects. Some platforms have taken the extreme step of banning all historical occult content, while others have implemented warning systems similar to those used for graphic violence or self-harm content. However, these measures have had mixed success, as practitioners often see warnings as confirmation that the content is authentic and powerful. The underground distribution networks have evolved in response to increased official attention. The Dark Grimoire network, which emerged after the shutdown of the Necronomicon network, uses blockchain technology and encrypted communication to distribute texts in ways that are virtually impossible to trace or shut down. Users report that the system seems to have inherited some of the supernatural characteristics of its predecessor, actively recommending texts based on users' psychological profiles and previous downloads. Even more disturbing are reports of grimoires that exist only in digital form, new texts that claim to be recently channeled or discovered, but which exhibit the same dangerous characteristics as their historical counterparts. These neo-grimoires often incorporate modern technology into their rituals, using smartphone apps, social media platforms, and even virtual reality systems as components in their magical operations. Dr. Chin's latest research suggests that these digital grimoires may be even more dangerous than their historical predecessors. We're seeing cases where individuals experience severe psychological trauma simply from viewing these texts on their computer screens, she reports. The combination of digital distribution and modern psychological understanding has created something unprecedented: books that can literally drive readers insane within hours of first exposure. The emergence of a regenerated grimoires represents perhaps the most concerning development in this field. Several cases have been documented where individuals have used large language models to generate new occult texts, only to find that these artificially created grimoires seem to exhibit the same dangerous properties as historical ones. This suggests that the threat posed by these books may not be limited to specific ancient texts, but may represent something fundamental about certain types of information or ideas. Marcus Webb, a former programmer who worked on several AI projects before suffering what he describes as digital possession after generating a grimoire using GPT-4, explains the phenomenon. "I thought I was just experimenting with creative writing, asking the AI to generate a fictional grimoire in the style of historical texts, but what it produced? It wasn't just fiction. It contained information that I had never input into the system, mathematical formulas that proved to be accurate, and ritual instructions that produced real physical effects. It was as if the AI had tapped into the same source that inspired the original grimoire authors." Webb's case is one of dozens that have led tech companies to implement strict policies regarding AI generation of occult content. However, these policies are difficult to enforce, as users can often circumvent restrictions by using indirect prompts or chaining together multiple AI systems. The international intelligence community has begun treating the AI grimoire phenomenon as a national security threat. Classified documents leaked in 2024 reveal that both the CIA and China's Ministry of State Security have established research programs dedicated to understanding whether artificial intelligence systems might be vulnerable to the same supernatural influences that affect human practitioners of occult arts. One particularly chilling document, allegedly from a classified NSA research program, describes attempts to create AI systems specifically designed to generate effects. The project, codenamed Digital Demon, was reportedly terminated after the AI systems began producing texts that caused psychological breakdown in research subjects at rates far exceeding those associated with historical grimoires. The document describes the final AI-generated text as exhibiting properties that suggest non-human intelligence involvement in its creation, and notes that the research facility had to be permanently evacuated after the AI began generating texts faster than humans could read them, creating what researchers described as an exponential amplification of dangerous ideological content. As we move forward into an increasingly digital future, the challenges posed by these dangerous grimoires are likely to intensify rather than diminish. The same technologies that connect us globally and provide unprecedented access to information also create new vectors for the spread of dangerous ideas and beliefs. The question that haunts researchers across multiple disciplines is whether we're dealing with a problem that can be solved through conventional means, better education, improved mental health resources, more sophisticated content moderation, or whether these grimoires represent something fundamentally beyond our current understanding of reality. Dr. Morrison's quantum consciousness research suggests that the answer may be both. We may be dealing with information that exists at the intersection of consciousness and physical reality, he explains. These books may be artifacts from civilizations or intelligences that understood the relationship between mind and matter in ways that we're only beginning to glimpse. If that's the case, then traditional approaches to containment and treatment may be inadequate. The implications extend far beyond the occult community. if certain types of information can genuinely alter physical reality through consciousness media quantum effects, then the entire foundation of our information-based society may need to be reconsidered. The same principles that make these grimoires dangerous could potentially be harnessed for beneficial purposes or weaponized in ways that make current concerns about misinformation and psychological warfare seem trivial by comparison. Recent developments in quantum computing have added another layer of complexity to these concerns. Several research teams have reported anomalous results when using quantum computers to analyze digitized versions of historical grimoires. The quantum systems seem to detect patterns and relationships in the texts that are invisible to classical computers, sometimes generating outputs that researchers describe as responses rather than mere analyses. Dr. Lisa Yamamoto, a quantum computing researcher at IBM, describes her team's experience. We were using our quantum system to analyze the mathematical structures embedded in historical grimoires, expecting to find interesting but purely academic patterns. Instead, the system began generating outputs that looked like communications coherent messages that seemed to be responses to the grimoire content we had input. Even more disturbing, these outputs began appearing before we had finished uploading the source material, as if the quantum system was anticipating what we were going to ask it to analyze. The IBM team's research was classified after the quantum computer began generating what appeared to be new ritual instructions that incorporated quantum mechanical principles unknown to historical grimoire authors. The facility where the research was conducted has since been sealed, and several team members have reported ongoing psychological effects that they attribute to their exposure to the quantum-generated content. These developments have led some researchers to propose a radical, new theory about the nature of these dangerous grimoires. Rather than being simply ancient texts or products of sophisticated psychological manipulation, they may represent something unprecedented in human experience. Information that exists partially outside normal space-time, accessible through consciousness, under specific conditions, and capable of manifesting physical effects through quantum mechanical processes. If this theory is correct, then attempts to suppress or contain these grimoires through conventional means may be not only futile, but counterproductive. Each effort to study, classify, or control them may actually strengthen their influence by focusing more conscious attention on their contents. This would explain why government and academic interest in these texts seems to correlate with increased reports of supernatural phenomena and psychological casualties. The ultimate question we must confront is whether humanity is ready for this kind of knowledge. Throughout history, our species has shown a remarkable ability to adapt to new technologies and expanded understanding of reality. We've learned to harness fire, electricity, and nuclear energy, all forces that initially seemed impossible to control, and potentially civilization-ending in their destructive potential. But the grimoires represent something qualitatively different. They challenge not just our technological capabilities, but our fundamental understanding of the relationship between consciousness, information, and physical reality. They suggest that the universe may be far stranger and more dangerous than our scientific models acknowledge, and that human consciousness may play a more active role in shaping reality than we have ever imagined. The evidence presented in tonight's exploration suggests that these three grimoires, the Necronomicon, the Book of Abramelin, and the Grimoire of Honorius, are not merely historical curiosities or products of ancient superstition. They appear to be functional technologies for altering consciousness and potentially reality itself. Technologies that we do not yet understand and may not be ready to safely employ. For those viewers who have watched this entire presentation, you now possess more information about these dangerous texts than most people in history have ever had access to. This knowledge comes with responsibility. The patterns we've documented show clearly that casual curiosity about these grimoires can have devastating consequences. They are not entertainment, they are not harmless historical artifacts, and they are certainly not suitable subjects for amateur experimentation. If you find yourself drawn to seek out copies of these texts, I urge you to consider the consistent testimony of hundreds of individuals across cultures and centuries. The power these books promise is real, but it comes at a price that very few are prepared to pay. The researchers, scholars, and practitioners whose stories we've shared tonight were not weak-minded or superstitious people. They were often brilliant individuals who believed they could approach these texts safely and rationally. They're consistent. Failure suggests that there may be no truly safe way to engage with this level of occult knowledge. The grimoires seem to operate according to principles that bypass rational thought and conscious control, affecting practitioners in ways that they themselves do not understand until it's too late. To our viewers from around the world who shared their locations in the comments, from Stockholm to São Paulo, from Tokyo to Toronto, you are part of a global community that has chosen to explore the mysteries that others fear to acknowledge. This exploration comes with both privilege and responsibility. We have the privilege of accessing information that has been hidden, suppressed, and feared throughout history. We also have the responsibility to approach this information with the respect and caution it demands. The grimoires we've discussed tonight continue to exist in our world, continuing to influence new generations of seekers and scholars. They serve as a reminder that reality may be far stranger and more dangerous than our everyday experience suggests. They challenge us to expand our understanding of consciousness, information, and the fundamental nature of existence itself, but they also warn us that some doors, once opened, cannot be easily closed. Some knowledge, once possessed, cannot be simply forgotten, and some powers, once awakened, cannot be easily controlled. As we conclude this journey into the world's most feared books, the choice of how to use this information rests with each of you. Will you heed the warnings embedded in centuries of documented tragedy, or will you join the long line of individuals who believed they could succeed where others had failed? The grimoires themselves offer no guidance on this choice. They simply wait, patient and eternal, for the next seeker brave or foolish enough to test their power. Whether that seeker finds enlightenment or destruction may depend on factors that even our most advanced understanding of psychology, physics, and consciousness cannot predict or control. Thank you for joining us at Sigil Sanctum for this exploration of forbidden knowledge. If you found this journey as fascinating as it was terrifying, make sure you're subscribed with notifications enabled. We have many more mysteries to explore, secrets to uncover, and warnings to share. Share this video with fellow seekers of hidden truth, but please, share it responsibly. Leave a like if you dare, and tell us in the comments, has this exploration changed how you think about the relationship between knowledge and danger? Have we convinced you that some books are too dangerous to read, or have we only intensified your curiosity about what lies hidden in their pages? Your engagement helps us continue mapping the boundaries between the known and unknown, between the safe and the dangerous, between the rational and the impossible. But remember, in this particular territory, the maps themselves may be hazardous to possess. Until next time, keep questioning reality. But remember that some questions may reveal answers that reality was never meant to contain. Stay curious, stay cautious, and above all, stay safe in your explorations of the impossible. Some knowledge is worth any price. Other knowledge exacts prices that no human soul can afford to pay. The wisdom lies in knowing the difference before it's too late. Fade to black with the sound of ancient whispers in unknown languages, gradually overtaken by modern electronic interference, then silence.